working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and welcome to ASEAN in Focus.
I am Crystal Mapa from EBC Thailand Bureau, giving you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. The Thai government declared a state of emergency, banning gatherings of more than 4 people and outlawing online posts deemed a threat to national security.
The International Monetary Fund forecasts a slow and uncertain recovery from the COVID-19 crisis.
In a joint statement, the UN and its NGO partners on the ground in Rakhine State expressed their sadness and shock concerning the killing of 2 children in fighting between Myanmar Army and the Arakan Army, according to a spokesperson.
El Al, Israel's flag carrier, today touched down at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport at 6:25 a.m., the first time since 2013.
First, the Thai government declared a state of emergency, banning gatherings of more than 4 people and outlawing online posts deemed a threat to national security. The order was aimed at stamping out the unconstitutional protests and came after demonstrators demanding the Prime Minister's resignation rallied outside his office in Bangkok overnight. The state of emergency allows for the seizure of electronic communications equipment, data, and weapons suspected to cause the emergency situation, according to a government spokesman. Tensions flared on Wednesday as thousands of demonstrators rallied around Democracy Monument in Bangkok ahead of a scheduled afternoon drive-by of a royal motorcade carrying King Maha Vajiralongkorn and his family. While police had cordoned off most of the protesters away from the royal route, dozens were still present as the motorcade passed. Queen Suthida could be seen staring from a limousine window as protesters held up 3-fingered salutes, a gesture of defiance the pro-democracy movement has borrowed from the popular Hunger Games books and films. Such overt challenges to the monarchy are unprecedented in Thailand, where the royal family's influence permeates every aspect of society. Thai police arrested more than 20 people, with the activists reporting a handful of high-profile leaders were among those detained. Now, those calls have prompted a backlash from Thailand's staunchly pro-royalist establishment. The king is the most powerful figure in Thailand and is supported by the kingdom's powerful military and billionaire clans. Student activists have staged huge demonstrations since July, calling for Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha, a former army chief who took power in a coup 6 years ago, to step down.
Thousands of protesters gathered in Bangkok ahead of pro-democracy rally, with tensions high after the arrest of 21 pro-reform activists a day earlier. Nearby, pro-monarchy protesters dressed in yellow also gathered, with many sitting on a footpath.
เพื่อให้ได้มาถึงสิทธิเสรีอย่างแท้จริงของพวกเราอย่าไปฟังคำสั่งที่มันไม่ชอบด้วยกฎหมายอย่าไปฟังคำสั่ง
ไม่มีอะไรอยู่ยั่งยืนตลอดไปทุกอย่างมันต้องมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงเราไม่ได้ขอให้ล้มลงไปเลยหายออกไปเลยไม่รับเลยไม่ใช่เราแค่ขอให้ปรับตัวไป
โชคดีแล้วนะคะที่เกิดมาเป็นคนไทยค่ะที่เกิดอยู่ประเทศไทยโชคดีแล้วนะคะรักประเทศไทยให้มากๆและสถาบันพระมหากษัตริย์เนี่ยรักให้มากๆเพราะเราก็ไม่รู้
In other news, the national government has set aside funds to purchase a coronavirus disease vaccine. But it will need more to ensure that every Filipino is vaccinated, according to President Duterte on Wednesday night. In a taped speech, the president said he needed more funds because there are now over 113 million Filipinos. Take a look.
Okay rin yan. But this I can assure you, again, na nakahanap na ako ng pera. I have the money already for the vaccine. But kahanap pa ako ng maraming pera because, you know, there are now 130 million Filipinos. And to me, ideally, all should have the vaccine, without exception. Again, mauna ang mga mahirap na walang pera, hindi makabayad. Ang listahan, yung doon sa pangtawid.
Meanwhile, the president reiterated that the government would prioritize giving vaccines to the poor listed as cash beneficiaries under the Pantawid Pamilya Pilipino program, or 4Ps. Next, he said, are the police and military, as they were among the frontliners in the fight against the coronavirus.
I want my soldiers, pati yung security forces ng bayan, mauna rin kasabay ng first batch, kasi kailangan ko ng mga sundalo at polis na ready, healthy at walang COVID. And they are really vital to the security of the state, for which reason they should be the first also.
He also said civilians can go last, but noted that he was also willing to be among the first to be inoculated with a vaccine from either China or Russia, who have both committed to provide the country with vaccines once developed. The president allayed fears over the safety of the Chinese vaccine, saying he trusted their experts. He also bared that he had a talk with outgoing Russian ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Igor Kovayev, about the vaccine Sputnik V. He said Russia committed to constructing a pharmaceutical plant in the country to produce the vaccines. If the schedule goes as planned, the president said the Philippines could have a vaccine as early as April of next year. Earlier, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the government can allocate 20 billion pesos to buy the vaccine with the help of the Philippine International Training Corporation, the Land Bank of the Philippines, and the Development Bank of the Philippines.
Staying in Philippines, the 23 villages within the town center of Catarman, the capital town of Northern Samar, have been placed under Enhanced Community Quarantine, or ECQ, starting today due to rising cases of coronavirus disease 2019. Under Resolution Number 12, signed by members of the Municipal Interagency Task Force against COVID-19, signed on October 13, the stricter moment restriction takes effect from October 15 to 30. ECQ suspends all face-to-face classes in public and private schools, restricts work in offices, strictly implements stay-at-home policy, and limited operations of enterprises. Businesses that are allowed to fully operate are hospitals, healthcare providers, and frontline services, industries involved in farming, fishing, and forestry, and delivery and carrier services providers. Government and private entities have been ordered to observe a skeleton workforce. The operation of all types of public transport at the town center has been suspended for 15 days. Liquor ban will be strictly enforced, and mass gathering is also prohibited. Frontline workers, farmers, and fishermen are exempted from movement restrictions as long as they have no symptoms of COVID-19 and adhere to minimum health standards. The local government has set up 3 entry and exit checkpoints to be manned by policemen, soldiers, health workers, and village officials.
Now is not the time for governments to pull back on supporting their economies, the head of the International Monetary Fund said in Washington, D.C. Let's listen in.
The picture over the last couple of months has become less dire, yet we continue to project the worst global recession since the Great Depression. Growth is expected to fall to minus 4.4% this year, and over the next 5 years, the crisis could cost an estimated 28 trillion in output losses. A durable economic recovery is only possible if we beat the pandemic, and we beat it everywhere. Stepping up vital health measures is our imperative, as is fiscal and monetary support to households and firms. These lifelines, such as credit guarantees, wage subsidies, they're likely to remain critical for some time to ensure economic and financial stability. Pull the plug too early, and then we can see serious self-inflicted harm. Avoid doing that. In the short run, given the high level of uncertainty, I worry most about withdrawing support to workers and firms prematurely, because it could cause a wave of bankruptcies and massive increase in unemployment. We are advising all governments, do as much as you can. Don't cut financial lifelines too early. When we look down the road, I worry about the scarring this crisis can cause, an increase in inequality. A crisis like no other calls for recovery like no other. We must dare to face our most daunting challenge together. We must dare to take the right actions now. Lending capacity to help support our members.
The UN Secretary General has called for solidarity with all people living in poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Antonio Guterres issued the appeal in a video message to mark the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, observed annually on October 17.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a double crisis for the world's poorest people. First, they have the highest risk of exposure to the virus and least access to quality health care. Second, recent estimates show the pandemic could push up to 115 million people into poverty this year, the first increase in decades. Women are at greatest risk because they are more likely to lose their jobs and less likely to have social protection. In these extraordinary times, we need extraordinary efforts to fight poverty. The pandemic demands strong collective action. Governments must accelerate economic transformation by investing in a green, sustainable recovery. We need a new generation of social protection programs that also cover people working in the informal economy. Joining together in common cause is the only way we will emerge safely from this pandemic. On the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, let's stand in solidarity with people living in poverty throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond.
And back in Geneva, the International Monetary Fund forecasts a slow and uncertain recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. Again, let's listen in.
Globally, that the ascent out of this calamitous great lockdown is likely to be long, uneven, and highly uncertain. It is therefore essential that fiscal and monetary policy support are not prematurely withdrawn as best possible. As a result of eased lockdowns and rapid deployment of both monetary and fiscal policy support, the world is coming back from the depths of its collapse in the peak of this crisis, which was the first half of this year. Employment levels have partially rebounded after having plummeted to historic lows. That said, this crisis is far from over. Greater international collaboration is needed to end this health crisis. Tremendous progress is being made in developing tests, treatments, and vaccines, but only if countries work closely together will there be enough production and widespread distribution to every part of the world to end this pandemic. Now, we estimate that if medical solutions can be made available faster and more widely relative to our current baseline, it could lead to a cumulative increase in global income of almost $9 trillion by end 2025, benefiting all economies and reducing divergence. If you exclude China from our 2021 numbers, then we have that the cumulative growth between 2020 and 2021 is going to be negative for the global economy. For most countries, for many countries in the world, we are seeing a return back to 2019 levels. Remember, this is levels and not per capita terms, but just in terms of levels by 2022. But then there are some regions of the world where it's projected to take even longer. And Latin America, for instance, we have that going into 2023 to return back to pre-pandemic levels. Now, there's variation. You know, China is already exceeding 2019 levels this year and continuing to grow cumulatively by 10% between this year and next. But for many, many other countries in the world, the return is gradual 2022 or 2023.
ASEAN in Focus will be right back. Stay tuned.
Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Turuan din natin ang mga bata ng tamang paghugas ng mga kamay. Basain ang kamay ng tubig at lagyan ng sabon. Kuskusin ang iyong mga palad. Gayon din ang pagitan ng mga daliri. Pati na ang likod ng mga palad at daliri. Ganon din ang iyong hinalaki. Kasama ang mga dulo ng iyong mga daliri. Pagkatapos ay iyong palapulsuhan. Gawin ito ng kahit 20 segundo. Pagkatapos ay banlawan ng tubig at patuyuin.
Welcome back. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi meets Lao President Bunhang Vorachith and Prime Minister Thongloun Sisulitas in Vientiane as China's top diplomat continues a regional charm offensive. During the meeting, Wang said the relationship between the LPRP and the CPC and that between the two countries were not affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but instead withstood tests and became stronger. The two sides, he said, with mutual support and solidarity, as well as joint efforts to overcome the current difficulties, have effectively brought the COVID-19 epidemic under control. The two sides also agreed to strengthen people-to-people exchanges, as well as coordination and collaboration in international and regional affairs, and develop synergy between the Lancang-Mekong cooperation and the new international land-sea trade corridor. The Lao foreign minister also pledged that Lao will make concerted efforts to push forward China's relationship with ASEAN.
In other news, a search operation has been launched for a missing rescue team as severe flooding and landslides battered central China, according to authorities, or central Vietnam rather, according to authorities, as the country braced for further heavy rains. Close to 1 million people have been impacted by heavy downpours and rising waters since mid-last week. More than 200,000 homes have been flooded, according to the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, or IFRC. Vietnam's Disaster Management Authority said 36 people are now dead. North-central Vietnam was also hit by severe weather on Wednesday as Storm Nangka made landfall. Forecasters said it could bring further rains in the coming days, while warning another storm was expected to form and make impact this weekend.
In Philippines now, a total of 127 families have so far been evacuated from landslide and flood-prone areas in the Bicol region due to inclement weather conditions caused by Tropical Depression Ophel. Based on initial details forwarded by National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, spokesperson Mark Cashin Timbal on Thursday morning, the evacuated families are from Camarines Norte, Camarines Sur, and Sorsogon. At present, he said no casualties were reported. In southern Luzon, he said that 134 families in Lucena City, Quezon, Bawan, Batangas, and Los Baños, Laguna were placed in evacuation centers. But with the weather improving, Timbal said, a number of the evacuated families have started to return to their homes. Also, floods was reported in Barangay Santa Cecilia, Tangkawayan, Quezon, but it has now subsided. Clearing operations are also ongoing at the Lopez-Hondagua Port Road in Quezon after it was blocked by fallen trees. Meanwhile, only one lane of the Tignawan-Mauban Road in Quezon is passable due to landslides.
In a joint statement, the United Nations and its NGO partners on the ground in Rakhine State expressed their sadness and shock concerning the killing of 2 children in fighting between Myanmar Army and the Arakan Army, according to a spokesperson. Addressing reporters in New York, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said the children died of gunshot wounds after fighting broke out on October 5th. Take a look.
And in Myanmar, in a statement issued by the UN and our NGO partners on the ground, they expressed their sadness and shock concerning the killing of 2 children in fighting between Myanmar Army and the Arakan Army in Rakhine State on October 5th. The children were part of a group of local farmers allegedly forced to walk in front of a Myanmar Army unit to ensure a path clear of landmines. The 2 children died of gunshot wound after fighting broke out. You know, we read these stories. We talk about these cases every day. This is really quite shocking. The statement called for a full, transparent, and expedited investigation of the incident and for anyone responsible for the killing of the children to be held accountable. It also expressed deep concern over the alarming increase of reports of killings and injuries of children in Myanmar. More than 100 were killed or maimed in conflict during the first 3 months of 2020, accounting to more than half of the total number in 2019. And significantly surpassing the total number of child casualties in 2018. As Myanmar tackles the COVID-19 pandemic, we and our partners urge all parties to the conflict to intensify efforts to ensure that children are protected from all grave violations and to ensure access to humanitarian aid and exercise maximum restraint in the use of force where civilians are present.
The children were part of a group of around 15 local farmers, all of whom were allegedly forced to walk in front of a Tatmadaw unit to ensure the path towards a military camp was clear of landmines and to protect soldiers from potential enemy fire. On the way, fighting broke out between the Tatmadaw and the Arakan Army, after which the 2 boys were found dead with gunshot wounds.
Around a year after the tragedy, in which 39 Vietnamese migrants were found dead inside a truck in Essex, UK, the victims' families could not forget the pain of losing their loved ones. But many don't want to blame the accused smugglers that are currently on trial in London for the appalling tragedy.
Riêng chú thì chú không quên được. Bởi vì cứ ngày rằm mùng 1 mà thắp hương hành trừ các cố xong thì bố thắp hương cho con là chú không tổng nước mắt là chú khóc. Cứ như mở phòng ra nhìn thấy anh ấy nữa. Nhìn thấy nó cháu thì chú không chịu.
Giờ nói chung là để cái trán họ là tôi cũng mong muốn lắm. Đó là vì cuộc sống thì có lẽ đời thường thì tôi cũng nghĩ rằng là ai cũng muốn làm tức là vì mình cứ bật cơm máy ngạo rồi thì như thế thôi, chứ cũng không phải là cố tình. Nếu mà cố tình thì họ không làm như thế, tôi nghĩ.
Dân họ thì số phận con thì đến đó thì phải chịu chứ con không nhận họ.
After ko bumasa, are on trial in London over the deaths of the 39 Vietnamese men and women facing various charges, including manslaughter and conspiracy to smuggle people. Like others from Vietnam's impoverished central provinces, the men were enticed by brokers to embark on illegal and dangerous journeys overseas. Young men and women often spend tens of thousands of dollars to escape the region's rice farms, chasing dreams of riches overseas. But many end up illegally working in nail bars or on cannabis farms in Britain, heavily indebted and subject to exploitation. But Tuan, like many of their grieving families, does not hold them responsible for the appalling tragedy. Yet most migrants do not see themselves as victims because they make the choice to live, according to local charity Blue Dragon's Lee Ting Hong Long, who specializes in anti-trafficking efforts. Last year's tragedy also did little to deter interest, she said, adding that many more will likely attempt the same journey once the pandemic ends and borders reopen.
To other news now, Deputy Foreign Minister and Head of SOM ASEAN of Vietnam, Nguyen Quoc Dang, and Senior Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, Takeo Mori, co-chaired the 35th ASEAN-Japan Forum, which was held virtually on October 14. Speaking at the event, Chenfu.vn, the government website of Vietnam, reported that the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Takeo Mori, asserted that Japan will enhance cooperation with the Southeast Asian nations, attaching importance to the ASEAN centrality. Japan advocates the ASEAN outlook for the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP, expecting to coordinate with the bloc in implementing the AOIP. Regarding the East Sea issue, Mr. Mori underlined the importance of peace and stability in the region, expressing concerns over recent developments in the East Sea. Mr. Mori is calling for dialogues and enhanced efforts in trust building, self-restraint, non-militarization, avoidance of use or threat of force, and settlement of disputes through peaceful measures on the basis of international law, including the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. Japan hopes that the relevant parties fully and effectively implement the Declaration of the Conduct of Parties in the East Sea, or DOC, and soon complete the Code of Conduct in the East Sea in line with international law in the UNCLOS. For his side, or for his part, Deputy Foreign Minister Dang highly valued the positive developments in the ASEAN-Japan cooperation despite challenges and difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, calling on ASEAN and Japan to continue close cooperation in controlling the pandemic.
ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
It says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Flight level 450. The flight on to 100%. Landing back. Level suctioning.
You're watching ASEAN in Focus. Manila Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso on Tuesday night launched the first ever linear park along Baseco Baywalk. The new park, with its lighting and landscaping, is seen to benefit residents in the area. Baseco is one of the challenging areas in Tondo, Manila, where informal settlers live. During the launch, Dumagoso asked for the cooperation of the public in maintaining the cleanliness and beauty of the rehabilitated portion of Baseco. However, Dumagoso warned criminals, especially those taking advantage of the poor communities, to stop their wrongdoings because he will not give up on pursuing them.
President Duterte on Thursday hailed outgoing Russian ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Igor Kovayev, on his successful tour of duty, saying the Philippines and Russia were able to redefine their relations in line with the administration's independent foreign policy during his stint. In a statement from the Office of the President, President Duterte said bilateral agreement or engagement has broadened and deepened during Ambassador Kovayev's tenure and since he visited Russia for the first time back in May of 2017. Key agreements were signed and consultative mechanisms established, particularly in the areas of defense and security, trade and economic cooperation, science and technology, and health, according to the Office of the President. President Duterte particularly cited Ambassador Kovayev's role in facilitating confidence-building activities between the Philippine and Russian defense establishments through exchange of goodwill, naval visits, and training of Philippine law enforcement personnel, among other joint activities. He identified promising areas of growth, including in trade and investment, defense and security, and public health, particularly in the common fight against the pandemic. President Duterte also conferred on Ambassador Kovayev the Order of Sikatuna, with the rank of Datu or Grand Cross Gold Distinction. Ambassador Kovayev, meanwhile, reiterated Russia's commitment to build an enduring partnership with the Philippines over the long term. Ambassador Kovayev also thanked the president for the positive momentum of Philippine-Russian relations, capped by unprecedented multiple meetings between President Duterte and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia is one of the countries that offered to supply the Philippines with the COVID-19 vaccines and possibly manufacture vaccines in the country.
El Al's, Israel's flag carrier, today touched down at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport at 6:25 a.m., the first time since 2013. Israel Ambassador Rafael Harpaz said that this historic flight symbolizes the good relations between Israel and the Philippines. Yesterday's flight, number LY063 from Tel Aviv, carried 250 Filipino students from different agriculture universities and colleges in the Philippines who completed their 11th month on-the-job training course of combined academic learning and practical work in the latest farming techniques and technologies in Israel. The program offered the students the opportunity to study at specialized agricultural academic centers and work in modern farms throughout Israel. Approximately 5,000 Filipino students have already participated in this agro-studies program. Another batch of Filipino students who studied agriculture or husbandry from Israel is scheduled to be flown in by El Al later on this month. The embassy said it looks forward that after the COVID-19 pandemic and through the existing visa-free agreement, more Filipino tourists will come to visit Israel and vice versa. And hopefully the direct flight services between two countries will be implemented soon. It was in November 2013 when two El Al Israeli planes carrying humanitarian aid first touched the Philippine soil via Cebu Airport to assist the Philippines in wake of Typhoon Yolanda. It was one of the biggest relief operations that Israel has ever conducted. The flight carried an Israeli delegation of doctors, nurses, and paramedics. The Israeli Foreign Ministry and defense personnel provided a field hospital and helped repair damaged infrastructures such as schools and water facilities, particularly in Bogo, Cebu.
All right, thank you, Crisel, for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Alma. Thank you. Thank you for having me in the show today.
Okay. Oh, what about the protests? Are you able to go to work despite? Or
I'm staying home right now, but from the reports that we have read, the protesters will be moving into the Ratchaprasong district. And Alma, this district is nearby malls, so this is more like they are closer to the public. Okay. And the traffic jam will be expected.
Oh, wow. As usual, the traffic, yes. Thank you so much, Crisel, for helping me out today.
Thank you, Alma. I'm glad to be of help. Those are the latest news around the ASEAN region. I am Crystal Mapa from EBC Thailand Bureau. We live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles. See you back tomorrow. We live in interesting times.